I started acting when I was a kid, and so I was like 5 years old when I started, and and here in the city in New York, but we grew up in North Jersey, a couple miles from here, but so close but so far away, that kind of thing. And so I was living this sort of like dual life where I was a professional actor in New York City and working with mostly adults, very adult world. I was very mature. I was, getting paid, all the sort of markings of an adult successful life. But then I was a kid in small town Jersey, going to school, trying to do sports, trying to fit in, trying to make friends. And so it was very, I don't know. It was hard to feel settled in any sort of way, and my household was, like I said, I had some issues with my parents, and a sort of nice, safe word to use, I think, is that it was all very operatic. We're Italian. Things were always very loud. Everything was at an 11. There wasn't, and there was a lot of that, a lot of yelling, a lot of fighting, and so there was all of that sort of happening, and me sort of wrestling with who am I? What any kid, of course, is trying to do. But I had these additional sort of things where I would feel comfortable as the actor, but then uncomfortable as the kid, or I would finally make friends and be comfortable as the kid, but then I, felt left out. I wasn't getting jobs as an actor. It was all very strange, and I was very sort of. Yeah, it's a weird role to have as a kid actor, because not only are you for work, essentially an adult in a lot of ways, but then it's sort of translated to home too. My parents, I don't know, I got into sort of a bit of a parental role at times accidentally. They weren't doing it on purpose either, but just, the dynamic sort of happened because of the situation, and that's uncomfortable. That still kind of happens, and it's uncomfortable at times. It's hard, but I had so many snakes in my head. I remember and I had really, really bad OCD, like debilitating OCD. Oh my gosh! So all kinds. I had like moral OCD, and I had germs OCD. I had, counting and numbers and all things like that. I had a religious thing that happened for a while. My parents, who are not very religious, but there was a fear of God, that they're Catholic, and there's, God is to be feared. He's not your friend. He's gonna punish you. God punishes. I mean, literally, like we'd bang our knee on a table, and be like, because I was running around the house, right? And I'd be running around and not listening to stop running, and then I bang my knee and I start crying, and it was like, well, God punishes. Like that's the sort of God that I grew up with.
Which you probably had to reconcile later.
I sure did.
Probably get there.
Sure did.
Yeah.
So one of the most intense, I think, battles I had with my OCD for a period was I would go to bed at night and a number would pop into my head, and whatever number popped into my head first, it could be 8 or it could be 47. That would be the number of Hail Marys, Our Fathers, and active contritions that I would have to say before I could fall asleep, or something horrible would happen to my parents, to me, to my sister, because God would want that to be the case. And so, and if I messed up, I would start doing it. If I messed up at any point, I would have to go all the way back to the beginning. And I would sit there for an hour, 2 hours more, saying these prayers in my head. That was a stretch I remember that was really bad. But I had it bad for a long time. And interestingly, my parents also have OCD, but they didn't know what it was. We didn't have even a term for it back then. And I would sort of get in trouble for it. Like I would wash my hands till they were bloody. And, it wasn't, oh, you have something happening here. How can we help you? It was, would you stop? You're bleeding you got blood on your sheets. Like what, it was that kind of, but they didn't know, like, anyway, yeah, I had I wanted to quiet the noises. I knew that for me, if there was something given to me where it would quiet the noises in my head in any way, shape, or form, or would make me feel like I fit into a certain place, because I just never felt like I was, in somewhere, I would take it. I knew for sure I would take it, like without a doubt. And so I started, as I got a little older, started hearing stories about people getting drunk and how it, to me, it all sounded great.
Yeah.
Even the war stories of throwing up. Oh, I threw up. But then they're telling the story and they're laughing about it.
Sounds fun.
So I'm like, this sounds great.
Yeah.
And so the first time I got drunk, I remember the snakes in my head chilled out. Like, I remember things quieted down.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember loving that.
It just sounds like a perfect storm. And I think that everybody who has been through it or who's going through it could probably relate to that. And, I think that a big misconception about alcoholics or addicts is that, there's all these childhood events, adverse childhood events and traumas, and that can definitely be the case. But sometimes not, sometimes it is this internal storm. And like with you, it sounds like you didn't really have like solid footing, because you had one foot in one life and another foot in another life. And like at that age, you should be, kind of solidifying this identity, and you had different identities and you're wearing a lot of different hats. And so it's like very destabilizing, it sounds like.
It was very destabilizing.
And then you have the OCD thing going on, and it's just a perfect storm. And none of that stuff makes someone an alcoholic, I don't think. I look at mine, and I had like this tumultuous relationship, and I had the discomfort, and I had the like just hyper self-awareness that was so suffocating. And then I had, the stuff at home that was mostly of my doing, like all of these things. And that was my storm. And that didn't make me an alcoholic, but it made me ripe for needing something outside of myself to regulate what was happening.
You were so susceptible.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that was it for me too. I definitely, and I was hyper self-aware too, which is obviously a great thing in so many ways. But it can get very loud, and you can get overly critical, and you can.
So how does that work with the career choice that you?
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. It's wild. It's like it's hard. I can be my own, worst enemy in so many ways. Mm-hmm. Most alcoholics can be.
Yeah, true.
Are.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's funny. Like the career, it wasn't really a choice, actually. I mean, it is a choice, but I kind of fell into it as a kid. Because you don't need to care about this story, but basically my older sister was a dancer. She was in this dance group in New Jersey, and they were really good, and they would travel around. And we, like I said, we grew up just outside the city, and so a lot of the moms started taking their kids into the city to try to get agents and managers. And my sister wanted to do it. My parents thought, hey, you know what? If she works, it'd be a good way to save money for college. Fast forward a couple of years, and the manager, my sister started working. The manager asked if I wanted to do it, and I took to it right away. I loved it, and despite it still to this day, to some extent, creating identity issues for myself and being destabilizing, it also gave me a validation that made me, that was really helpful as I was questioning myself and feeling bad about myself and not fitting in. I'd be in Jersey and go to school, and it'd be hard making friends, but I'd go on an audition and I'd make the casting director laugh, or I'd get this job and I'd be in a commercial and everyone would be like, oh my God, you're so good. And they'd tell my mom, your son's so good. And that was a validation that, in a lot of ways saved me through my childhood, saved it from being, I think, even worse than it could have been, but led to some other issues, So yeah, it's I don't know what I'm answering here, but yeah.
Well, the hyper self-awareness and being an actor and watching yourself, presumably, and then having all of these other people watch you
and judge you.
I think like I would never be able to.
It's
I
really,
would just die.
yeah. I'm lucky in that I've achieved a certain amount of success that I has given me a certain confidence, of course. Sometimes at the same time, incredibly confident in my abilities, and yet super, doubtful and critical and having self-esteem issues. It's really crazy. Part of that is just because the industry itself is so incredibly fickle. So while you might feel like you're good and you did the right thing and you're talented enough to get X, Y, or Z role, you don't get it and you get rejected and it throws you off again and you start questioning things. Or I have. And so no matter how much confidence I will bring to a certain, performance or role or audition or meeting or whatever it is, I wish I could guard it better and protect it more. But there's weaknesses in it too. It can be, you can poke holes in it rather quickly. And this is after 42 years of doing this. Like, it's still hard to get rejected, It's, I've probably learned how to deal with it better than a lot of people just because I've had to deal with so much of it. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt any less each time it happens. I have tools now, particularly in sobriety and through my program, that I can, yeah, exactly. And I can sort of get myself out of that hurt quicker than maybe some other people could, but it still fucking stings, But especially, and like, look, and it used to be so much easier when I could drink.
Yeah.
Like it was, I got this, like, this is great,
Yeah.